So it is really great to be here with Robbie. She and I had a chance to have a bit of a dress rehearsal at Yellowstone. We were at a gathering, a small gathering of a few dozen people that Eric Schmidt had convened. And we had a conversation in a living room with a few people listening. And now we are in this ballroom with all of you here. But we want to have the same kind of intimate conversation because, first of all, that's the kind of person that Robbie is. Of course, before this momentous case, she was known just as a powerhouse corporate litigator. And then on June 26, 2013, she entered the history books when the Supreme Court, in a ruling of 5-4, declared DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, unconstitutional. And I want us to just stop for a moment to just recognize that this gets in the history books alongside the Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil Rights Act, all the big milestones of America's journey towards a perfect union. And here is Robbie, the woman who achieved this victory. So can we give her a big round of applause? So, Robbie, I want to ask you first about how quickly things changed, because in 2006, you lost a big case in New York filed by 13 couples, one of whom actually was waiting for a liver transplant, and she just wanted to make sure that her partner of 24 years would be able to be with her in the hospital. You lost that case. Then in 2009, the Obama administration filed a really ugly brief in defense of DOMA. And then in 2010, you took that historic case of Edie Windsor. And things began to change. Even before the Supreme Court decision, things began to change. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's no question that perhaps unlike any other movement in our nation's history, the pace of change, particularly within the last several years with respect to gay rights, has been dramatically rapid. And we really haven't experienced anything like this before. When we filed Edie Windsor's case, of course, we filed Edie Windsor's case in 2010, and at that point in time, Edie, who lives just a few blocks away from me in New York City, when her spouse was still alive, they were unable to get married in New York, and as you pointed out, Arianna, that's my fault. The reason they had to get married in Toronto is because I lost the case in 2006, so I took the blame for that. We filed the case in 2010. By 2011, New York had passed through the legislature a bill allowing gay couples to marry in New York. If you told me in 2006 that that was going to happen 5 years later, I would have told you you were nuts. And then, as the case progressed, more and more states passed, either through court action or legislatively, laws allowing gay people to marry. So that by the time when I argued the case in March, there were 9 states. When the case was decided in June, there were 13 states. And that's a very good example of the pace of the change.
Also, it's very important for all of us to remember how strategic you were along the way, beyond your masterful arguing of the case. First of all, you knew that you had to get Bill Clinton on the record because the Supreme Court was very aware of the fact that Bill Clinton had signed DOMA into law. And I love the conversation of you with various members of the Clinton staff. And my favorite line is when you said to one of them that one day the president will have to meet his maker. So this was really hardcore lobbying.
Yeah, that's about as hardcore as it gets in terms of lobbying. We were very aware that President Clinton had signed in 1996 DOMA into law, and that we had good reason to believe, knowing the kind of person that he is, and the kind of person that his wife and daughter are, that he had come to regret that decision. And we knew that if there was no public statement by the president by the time I argued, then some of the justices on the other side would probably use that against us to say, how can you say there's anything wrong with this law? After all, President Clinton signed it. So we had some conversations with the president's staff beforehand. And I have to admit, sometimes I can be a bit high pressure. I did say that everyone has to meet their maker, and if we believe that the president regrets his decision and the time to express that is now, And he did, to his great, great credit, a true mensch that he is. He wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post that came out about 2 weeks before the oral argument.
And then you applied some of the same hardcore techniques. I want you all to take notes here if you're lobbying. When the White House asked you for an extension in order to decide whether they were going to come out against DOMA or defend it. And again, you used some of these tactics with Tony West.
Yeah, this was a really dramatic, probably the only time in the case that I was truly the most surprised is when President Obama changed his view on DOMA. This is even before he changed his view on marriage and decided that he wasn't going to defend the statute. You know, people can be cynical about things and think that everything's based on some kind of cynical calculation. I truly believe in my heart that this was based on principle. And I've said, and I believe this is true, that I don't think it's a coincidence that the three people who made that decision, President Obama, Attorney General Holder, and Tony West, were all African-American men. I think when they thought about it, they just said to themselves, we cannot write a brief saying that this is okay. So about 30 days or so after we filed the case, I got a call from Tony West. And he asked me for an extension so that the president and he could decide and deliberate about what to do. And I'm a bit of, I have to admit, a hard-bitten New York litigator. And so I didn't really believe him. I was cynical myself. And I thought, oh, yeah, you just want more time. Ultimately, I agreed to give the extension. But at the end of the call, I said to Tony, OK, Tony, if that's what you're going to be doing, that's great. I want you to know that I will be praying for you and the president as you make that decision. Flash forward 30 days. It's spring vacation. I'm on the beach with my family. And I get an email saying the Attorney General and the Assistant Attorney General would like to have a phone call. We knew immediately what it meant. On the phone call, Tony announced that the president, after deliberating, had decided that DOMA was unconstitutional and that the government would not defend it in court. I had tears literally streaming down my face. And at the end of the call, Tony said to me, you know, Robbie, you remember that thing you said to me about praying for me and the president? And I said, yeah, of course. And he said, you know, sometimes prayer works. That was the end of the call.
So this is a group of high-powered women. I don't think any of us have had as big a day as you had to have to argue the case in front of the Supreme Court, but we all had big days when we had to prepare for them. So how did you prepare? Kind of take us into your hotel room. You were staying, she was staying here, yep. You were staying here, and Rachel, your wife, and Jacob, your 7-year-old son, were here, although in a separate room so that you could be undistracted. But tell us about what you did the night before, sure. And tell us what you wore on the day. And
so, believe it or not, there were very intricate planning involved in all of these things. Actually, when I came here for the conference, I tried to get the same hotel room. It's now my lucky hotel room, but unfortunately it was booked. Probably someone in the audience has it.
Maybe you can change rooms.
So it was a very high pressure. The 3 months or so leading up to the argument was very high pressure. One of the things that people do to prepare to argue in the Supreme Court is do what's called a moot court. It's a practice. And you basically invite people to come into a room and to beat the you-know-what out of you as hard as they can, asking you very tough questions. So I probably did about a dozen of those to prepare. Leading into the argument, though, we'd done a lot of work. And I had spent, when I wrote the brief, I didn't leave my office for 16 days. So it was a very intensive period. By the time we got up to the argument, I felt that we had done, and I think the team felt that we had done everything we could. The Monday, the argument was on a Wednesday. The Monday before the argument was the first night of Passover. And we actually had a Seder in the room that you check in for this conference. We had 70 people. It was a real tight fit. And the entire legal team was there. Edie Windsor was there. My entire family was there. It was probably one of the best evenings of my entire life. And obviously, the theme of Passover is freedom. So that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The next day, which was the Tuesday, there was the argument in the Proposition 8 case. That was the California case. And I went to those arguments and watched Ted Olson do a marvelous job arguing. We came back to Paul Weiss's offices in D.C., and we met, and we talked about whether there was anything we needed to do to change our strategy. and we were feeling pretty good. We decided that there wasn't anything to do. So I then decided that the best thing I could do to prepare would be to go back to the hotel room, invite my son for milk and cookies to my room, and watch Johnny Test cartoons on my bed. And that's what I did the day before.
And then the day of, you had decided what you're going to wear.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I don't want you.
Oh, I apologize.
Come on, right?
So there was a lot of planning that went into the clothes. Most importantly, I had a hard time deciding what shoes to wear. And my co-counsel, Pam Carlin, who's a very famous constitutional lawyer, she's very close friends with Nina Totenberg. So Sunday before the argument, I should have started backwards. Sunday, Nina Totenberg came to my hotel room and helped me decide which pair of shoes to wear. And we decided to go with the Ferragamos instead of the Gucci's, even though, as Nina said, there's no way they can see your shoes anyway.
So I want to leave 5 minutes for questions from you, and we only have 8 minutes left, but I have two very quick questions. One is that on the day of the argument, it has been said, you haven't said it, but it has been said by others, that Justice Roberts was kind of baiting you by saying things like everybody, all politicians are falling over themselves to support gay marriage, et cetera, et cetera. And you had been advised, whenever you are likely to react or lose your temper, to keep looking at Elena Kagan. So tell us about that.
Yeah, again, Ted Olson gave me very good advice, which is before you get to the argument, you really need to kind of filter out all the advice that you're getting, because you have 85 people giving you 200 different kinds of things to be doing, and at a certain point, you just can't take it anymore. So by the end, I was really only listening to two people, one of my colleagues from Paul Weiss and Pam Carlin, who I mentioned. And Pam said to me, look, Robbie, when you get up there, the one thing you should do is just focus on Justice Kagan. Whatever she says, you need to agree with immediately. She will indicate to you where she thinks the court is going, so you should take clues from that. And that's one strategy that you should have. So when I got up to argue, she didn't ask me a single question. She asked a very tough question of my adversary about the legislative history, but she didn't ask me anything. But as I was facing the Chief Justice, who's literally directly in front of you, and he was asking me some tough questions, I kept looking all the way to my right, which is where Justice Kagan sits. And I have no idea, I'll find out tonight, I have no idea whether this was deliberate or not, but the entire time she was smiling. So I kept looking to my right, seeing her smile, thinking, this must be going okay, she's still smiling. And I probably did that a half dozen times during the argument.
So in the course of the last few months, since we got to know each other, we've been exchanging emails, and some of the best stuff you've sent me are sermons by your rabbi. And clearly, that centered place in you is very, very important. It's given you, I think, a lot of the perspective that made it possible for you to be so amazing beyond your brilliant mind in winning that case. And so the last sermon that you sent me, I have to meet this rabbi, Jan Ubach, was about the fact that there is still this idolatry in all of us, that we may not actually worship real idols, but we worship a lot of things that make us lose perspective about what matters in life. So I'd love to end my part before we go to the audience by asking you what your spirituality and the world that Jan and others in your life represent means to you.
Yeah, there's no question that I think that helped to keep me centered. One thing that was very important to us was for the court to understand that religious people are not only on one side of this issue. This is a religious issue for everyone, and there are very religious people who believe just as strongly as people on the right that gay people have equal dignity to everyone else. And so we worked very hard on getting an amicus brief from very mainstream groups, including, for the first time ever, the entire conservative Jewish movement signed on to this brief, making that point. And it's definitely very much a part of my life. The Saturday after we won, my synagogue held a special celebration of the victory. It happened to be right around July 4th, too, so it was very appropriate. And we danced, we sang and we danced around the room with the Torah, which is the Old Testament. And my dear friend Jan Urbach had a psalm commissioned for the victory that talked about truth and justice and loving kindness kissing. It comes directly, I think, from Psalm 51. And she had it put to music, which we all sang. And then probably the most touching part of it all is she wrote a letter to be read to my son, who's now 7, upon his bar mitzvah, so a few years from now. And she read it to us, and to my son, and to me, and to the whole congregation. So that's another moment I will never, ever forget.
That's beautiful. So let's open it up to you for 1 or 2 quick questions. And who wants to go first? Yes. And if you can give us your name and...
Yeah. Louise Pentland, I'm the Chief Legal Officer at Nokia, and as a fellow attorney, we all aspire to a case like that. But what next?
Most importantly, short term, is to spend some more time with my family and my son that I didn't get to spend during the case. I actually unlike a lot of people who do this work, I'm not a civil rights attorney. I tend to represent clients like Nokia in cases in New York, and I love doing that. So for the near term, that's my plan, to get back to doing what I love doing.
Yes, in the back.
Hi, Robbie, Susie Scher. I should have bowed to you this morning when I met you. I had no idea who you were. And my wife thanks you, I thank you, and my 4 kids thank you as we're about to file our first joint tax return. My accountant even thanks you. Thank you. So I have a little bit of a different what next question, not what next for you, and not to put a damper on the incredible victory, but Maggie Nielsen reminded me last night of how many laws are still out there on the books that discriminate against gay people, and not everybody has the fortune to live in New York or LA where it's legal and cool and everybody gets it. So what next, and how long will it take before gay people and gay families are not discriminated against anywhere in our great country?
Well, what I can't answer is what's next. That I can answer. In terms of how long it will take, I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not sure I can give you a good answer on that. The Supreme Court, in its opinion, Justice Kennedy's opinion for the court, uses the word dignity 26 times in 10 pages. Or no, 10 times, excuse me, in 26 pages. I'm not good at numbers. That's why I became a lawyer. In the opinion. And I decided to look up the word dignity. I mean, we all know what it means, but I decided to look it up. And it means, according to the dictionary, the state or quality of being worthy of respect. And really, I mean, that's pretty much exactly what the Windsor case and what getting rid of DOMA was all about. The Supreme Court has now said 10 times in 26 pages that gay people and their relationships are worthy of equal dignity and respect. And legally speaking, I think it may take longer than we'd all like, but I think it's pretty much all over but the shouting. I think that the Battle of Normandy, in terms of the gay rights struggle, has been won. It's going to take some time to get there, just as it did in World War II, but I think that will happen. And you're seeing it happen. There have already been decisions in states like New Jersey, which relied on Windsor, Pennsylvania, Ohio, already with judges saying that in light of that ruling, gay couples need to have equal rights in all those states.
We could have gone on for much longer, but Robbie, thank you so much, not just for your brilliance and your passion, but for your grace. Thank you.